AFC Podcast. My name is Victoria Fragnito. I have Jim Galizia with me.
Hello.
Say hi.
Hi, Jim. I hate myself. Welcome to the AFC Podcast, everybody. Today we're going to have our day player is Tim Dowd. He's going to come on. He's going to talk to us about Plan Z Productions, his company that he co-owns and runs with his collaborator, Molly Densmore. And we're going to talk about some of the stuff they do. They do a lot of comedy sketch videos. They're really funny. He brought a sketch along that we're going to play later called The Good, the Hot, and the Oh So Dumb. And it's a Shakespeare dating fable. A lot of their sketches are based on Shakespeare plays, and they're very loose adaptations of sorts. We're also going to talk about his movie of choice, Hedwig and the Angry Inch.
And that's going to lead us into talking about some musicals and talking about some box office flops and cult classics, which Hedwig and the Angry Inch is definitely both of those. It was a box office flop and a cult classic now. I mean, this film has such a following, and there's so many films like that and TV shows and, everything that someone discovers it later and realizes what a gem it actually is. And
Right.
develops this whole new following to it.
I mean, especially too, Hedwig and the Angry Inch definitely had the advantage of being adapted into a play or a musical.
Musical first.
Musical first.
Indie musical first on
Right.
downtown stages in New York, and then the original star was approached on adapting it, and he also wrote the script. He was approached about adapting it into film, did that, and then the stage made the rounds for years and years and years and years, and finally hit Broadway, the Great White Way, a couple years ago.
I mean, it's a testament to passion projects, I guess. Sometimes when people make a project and they're really passionate about it and they're very talented as well, sometimes people don't notice it right away, but eventually, hopefully, everybody's passion projects get noticed and they blow up and they become a little successful and they develop that cult following. Because there definitely is a huge amount of people that love this movie. I personally have heard of it, but I'd never seen it. So this was a new experience for me. We've talked about musicals and Broadway shows and stuff before. I'm a fan of musicals and Broadway shows. They're fun. I mean, how do you feel about it not making any money at first? Like, some movies come out and they just do so bad, even though they're good.
And this definitely did. Like, their budget was to make the film was $6 million, and it only took in about half that.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, like, it made the rounds on the festival. Just goes to show you sometimes that, like, how not connected all the time, like, some of these, more prestigious awards don't always feel the pulse of what's going on in the society, going on in the festival circuit. I wish sometimes that these things were a little more open and people could experience them more. Like, one of the good things, I guess, about quarantine right now is Tribeca releasing a lot of their short films online. Same with South by Southwest, Cannes, and what was the other film festival that's releasing their stuff? Sundance?
Yeah, I believe so.
Sundance. I mean, these are films that normally don't get a wide audience, so you don't get to see kind of the direction that these films are taking. You don't get to experience anything different beyond, Trolls, video on demand, that kind of thing. So it's.
Did you watch Trolls?
No, and I will not.
That judgment coming hard. Not that I watched Trolls, but
I'm sure it's a lovely family film. I just no.
Not. I mean, I don't know. I mean, certainly now there's some movies that just came out right before the coronavirus that I guess will be considered bombs because they came out and then the movie theaters closed, so they could not make money. Therefore, I guess they are box office bombs. But when a movie comes out and it's really good, and the critics all say this movie's really good, and it makes no money, it sucks because sometimes there's potential to do more projects or do more with that storyline, and it goes nowhere. Sometimes a movie's gonna bomb though. Like, before you go see it, like Sonic the Hedgehog. That was a fun movie. I watched it. I enjoyed it. It was a good time. Sonic looked like shit when they first did the first trailer.
Mm-hmm.
And to the point where basically everyone cyberbullied the production company into redesigning their character. They spent like $30 million to redesign that whole movie with the new version of Sonic the Hedgehog. And I think it did really well. I haven't looked into it, but from what I hear, it was pretty well received. Like, a lot of people went to go see it. I feel like a lot of people were like, we have to support this movie because we cyberbullied this studio into redesigning this character for $30 million.
They actually,
or they make that money back.
well, because they actually listened.
Yeah.
Because honestly, that original Sonic was the stuff nightmares are made of. Not quite as bad as Cats, but.
No. Why did you have to bring up Cats? Because now I'm going to have nightmares again.
I'm sorry.
But yes, I mean, Sonic the Hedgehog looked terrifying, and the studio basically heard their audience, their entire audience that would have cared about this movie is who commented. And they all said, wow, this is scary. Let's never go see this. So the studio, which hardly ever happens, usually the studio's like, I don't give a fuck. But the studio stepped in and said, we really want you guys to be happy with this film. Let's redo it. And you gotta love all those actors in that movie too. They're all fantastic. Who's the main guy who plays? He's also played Cyclops in X-Men, and he's Teddy in Westworld. He's in a bunch of other stuff too.
That's, James. He was in Dead to Me. Why can't I remember his name?
It's James Marsden. James Marsden.
Thank you. I was about to handy dandy phone it.
And everybody's favorite character from Parks and Recreation, Ben Schwartz, is Sonic the Hedgehog. He's fantastic. The movie is really fun. People should check it out.
Well, I think also with Sonic, they had the rare opportunity of being able to kind of pinpoint what exactly they didn't like about it from like the trailers and the teasers, whereas sometimes you don't know how badly a story's going to do. Like that film that Melissa McCarthy did with the puppets, the Happy Time Murders, the trailers, in my opinion, looked hilarious. It really looked very, very funny. And then it came out, and the critics and audiences alike panned the crap out of it because all of the funny stuff was reserved for the trailers. All the rest of it was terrible. The jokes were flat, or they took too long to set up, all of this other stuff. So sometimes you can't always pinpoint exactly what is going to be bad about the film until it comes out. But Sonic looks terrible. He looks terrifying. He's going to give my children nightmares. Please change it.
Yeah. I mean, well, that's just credit to that marketing team that put those trailers out and made everybody think this is going to be really good, because a lot of people went to go see it. So that marketing team's got their finger on the pulse. They know what people want. Mm-hmm. And the people who made the Sonic movie also, too. And I mean, you put Jim Carrey in anything, and I'm going to see it.
Yeah.
It's a guarantee. So that movie was destined for greatness, whether Sonic was a nightmare or not. I'm just glad that they really changed it, made it really nice. But that movie was destined to bomb, and they fixed it, which is the rarest thing in Hollywood sometimes. Yeah. Sometimes you see a bomb coming, and you're just like, this is going to go crazy. This is going to blow. This bomb is going to blow, and it's going to be really bad.
Like Cats.
Like Cats. Cats. Even the actors in the movie Cats were like, this is fucked.
Well, the thing, and again, this goes back to musicals being turned into movies. Or I need to like quote Jeff Goldblum from Jurassic Park. They spent so much time thinking, whether or not we could. We didn't think whether or not we should. They shouldn't have done it. The thing about Cats is, like, you sit in a theater and you suspend your disbelief that the adult humans that are dancing in front of you in cat suits are cats. They're not that creepy because you could tell that that's a human in a spandex suit with a lot of makeup on. Like, you get that. And I think the movie completely took the wrong turn was making them CGI. You could have kept it cats, humans in cats and makeup, and you probably could have done some really interesting things with those because it's a film and it's up close, and you can adapt some of the things for film and make them in a large, the size of cats in large sets and things like that, and that still would have been really, really interesting and probably would have been a lot more fun. But you couldn't stop watching how freaking creepy these cat humans, like, why did Taylor Swift's cat have tits? Like, why? It's not necessary.
She's the hot cat. She has to be the
It
hot
has to be a hot cat. Like,
I'm not going to answer that question because the furries will attack me off of 4chan. They'll I don't know why that movie exists. I don't even know I've never seen Cats, so I don't know the subject matter of it. But is it possible to have made it like an animated cartoon movie with just cats?
So Cats the musical is based off of poetry by T.S. Eliot. There is no real through line. There's one story about how the cats are essentially kind of trying to volley for position to be like the chosen cat that's like sent to heaven, whatever, and they end up choosing Grisabella, who's this old worn cat who's had a rough life, and the other cats don't treat her nicely, and blah 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 blah. But like that's the most plot that there is to it, really. The rest of it is just being introduced to different types of cats and what they do in the world of cats. So like there's
Sounds like the plot doesn't have a focus, and that really works because cats can't focus on shit. So
I mean, yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
But I think it works as a musical because it's just spectacle and music. Like that's all it is, and that's all it needs to be. And with a film, you can do that, and film definitely has can be spectacle. But like I've said, and will always say, you lose something when you're not in the room with it, when it's not happening live in front of you. There's that magic that ends up going away. And so
there's movies like The Greatest Showman that did pretty good. I had issues with that movie because the whole movie I was watching it, I was like, Hugh Jackman's character is a bad person. He's doing all these things that, like, if a person did that today, they'd like cancel culture would have shut him down. Like, I have to rewatch that movie to really say exactly what all of I just remember his character kept, like, he left his wife to go on the road with some gorgeous redhead, and then came back later and was like, we can be together, it's fine. And then, like, it was just a whole mess of just him doing whatever the hell he wanted. And the whole time I'm watching, I'm like, I mean, this movie is great, like, it's visuals and the show is cool, but it certainly made me feel some type of way, So whether it's good or bad, that's a good thing on the film's part. They know how to make people feel emotions. So I don't know. Have you ever come out of a movie and you're not? It wasn't a bad movie, but you're pissed off. Like something about the movie pissed you off and made you feel some type of way. Vice versa, maybe you felt a new emotion. Like when I saw the first live action Transformers movie for the first time, that was the first movie that I had seen that was like special effects. Like I couldn't tell the difference. Like, I mean, I was like 11 or 12 when that movie came out. So I walked out of that movie and I was just like, all these cars are going to transform. Like I was freaking out. I was so excited because I was like, this is going to be cool. I'm like Shia LaBeouf. And that was a new emotion. Like I was so excited. It was a new emotion for me. Have you ever walked out of a movie that made you feel something at your core, like just a weird, different feeling or anything like that?
I mean, yeah, it's hard for me to pinpoint. Like I remember the first movie that made me bawl my eyes out was The Notebook. I was in.
You couldn't have come up with a more white girl thing to say.
I know. I would apologize, but white girl. Like I don't know. But it came out. I was in high school, early high school, and I went to see it with a bunch of my girlfriends, and I remember bawling through essentially the whole movie, and then You get to the end, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it, they die together because their love is so strong it takes them away together, which when I say out loud sounds absolutely ridiculous. But if you follow the whole film, you fall in love with them. And then we walked out of the theater, and I mean, we were bawling, obviously. We were, ninth grade girls, but everyone in the theater was coming out crying. And it was a packed theater. So I just remember walking out, and there was another film that was exiting at the same time on the other side, and everyone was just looking at us like, what the fuck just happened in that theater? Because everyone's walking out like, oh my god, they love each other. Like, that was the whole thing.
Ryan Gosling is so beautiful.
Yes. But I just remember everyone like watching us as we come out and just being like, what just happened?
Mm-hmm. I mean, too, I'm sure, I don't know remember what movie those guys were walking out of?
No, it was some, I don't remember what it was. It wasn't, some action or whatever from that summer that came out. It wasn't anything.
So curious now.
You got to look up what came out that summer?
Yes, I want to compare it so that I can say what movie people were. Okay, June 2004. Damn, that's an old movie now.
Yeah, right?
June 2004 movie releases: Spider-Man 2 with Tobey Maguire or Dodgeball.
I think it was Dodgeball.
Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban.
No, it's definitely Dodgeball.
These are the hits.
I just remember thinking like it was the exact opposite of what we had seen.
Well, Dodgeball is pretty much the exact opposite of The Notebook.
Yeah.
1000%. I love that movie. That's another movie that is just like, it shouldn't have been good. Like, if someone explained the plot to you and said, hey, I want to write a movie about a gym. And you go to the gym, and there's two gyms. There's a really big one that's like a conglomerate chain gym, like Planet Fitness type of stuff, but like Gold's Gym. And then there's like a really down-to-earth cool gym where Vince Vaughn is the peak of physical fitness there. And to save their gym, they have to play dodgeball. What?
Yeah.
It's also my favorite role of Jason Bateman's, being one of the announcers with, I think he was with Gary Cole.
Oh, I forgot he was in that film.
Yeah.
Oh, I need to rewatch that now.
It's exciting, Cotton. We're going to see what they do. That was the worst impression ever, but such a fun movie. All right, now seems a good a time as any to bring in our day player, Tim Dowd. We're going to talk about Plan Z Productions, and after the interview, stay tuned, we're going to play one of his skits called The Good, the Hot, and the Oh So Dumb, a Shakespeare dating fable. Okay, we are here with Tim Dowd, the great leader of Plan Z Productions. Tim, tell us a little bit about your company.
Great leader. That's the least comfortable I've ever been. Okay, that's cool. So Plan Z Productions is it is my production company. We're an indie film company / sketch comedy company. Basically, it's my brand for anything that I choose to do, any kind of creativeness. Technically, I think I started as a webcomic back in high school, but now we're here. We're grown up a little bit. So we started off making a feature-length film because I don't believe in doing things easily, apparently. And we made this feature-length film called Three-Way, which is coming out now-ish. It was playing the film festival circuit until the world ended. So if you're watching this in the future, hi, it's terrible now. But the movie, it came out to about a long-term couple that decide to try to have a threesome. But then they have to find a third person. That's kind of comedy ensues, one hopes. But so they try to go out there. We got to finish the movie, and now actually we have a sales rep, and we're trying to get it out there to distributors and stuff like that. And that's all very fun. But doing that movie took about, from first writing it, filming it through post-production, took about 6 years. and that's objectively too long. And so I felt
objectively, sometimes people working on something for like 20 years and they finally get it right. Like Avatar, I think, what did he start working on it 15, 20 years ago? And then he put it out finally, and when the special effects caught up to it. So there's no time limit on greatness.
This is true, but he also was paid about $2 billion. And I paid about 30,000.
You should get the equivalent, like the fraction of, like, he did 20 years of waiting, you did 6. So you should get, it's like
a half a
bill,
billion,
something like that.
So they get there. No, I think my concern was, I felt like, how much could I be growing as an artist, as a creator, if I've only made one project? And when you put that much money, you put that much time, you feel like it becomes your baby in a bad way, in a good and a bad way. You care about it, you worry about it, but then it's very easy for anyone to make you spend money you don't have by saying, but I mean, it's your movie. Don't you want it to have the best? And I think that makes your project safer, because it's like, this is the one movie I've been making for 6 years. I need it. And so I think in the narrative, there used to be bigger swings, bigger jokes that I thought were more interesting, that I think we cut just because it wasn't playing to a wide enough audience. And I think if you want to experiment, I think if you want to be ballsy, I think you need to be less precious with your stuff. So once we finished the feature, I want to go back to the drawing board, and I want to make things quicker. I want to make them a little bit sloppier. I want to be less precious with my things, so I can put out a project and be like, hey, that was terrible, but whatever. It took us a month. We're fine, and in that way, hopefully continue to grow. So we started Plan Z Productions sketch comedy department, and doing that, the idea was to put out monthly sketches. That has been, varying levels of success. But by starting that, me and a collaborator, my Molly Densmore, struck on an idea very quickly, called the Shakespeare Dating Fable. And it was exploring modern dating foibles through the Shakespearean lens. We take certain Shakespearean characters, bring them here, and explore some element of modern dating life. So like, for instance, our first one is called 12th Tinder. If you're familiar with the Shakespeare play Twelfth Night, Viola dresses up like her brother Sebastian for various plot reasons. We decided to explore that by having a guy bring Viola home and revealing that Viola's kink is that she likes to role play as her brother. And then we had a different actor play her brother. So every time she switches into a costume, it's just like suddenly a different person. And how the other guy has to deal with that. But in that way, we're kind of exploring what it's like in the modern dating landscape, and like people's kinks are coming so much more out of the closet. And as a result, there used to be a thing in comedy of like, wow, I went home with this lady and she did this crazy thing. And now it's like, we've become so tolerant and so accepting of it that really, like, you're kind of the asshole if you think what they wanted to do was weird. And so we wanted to put that guy in that awkward situation of like, oh, okay, yeah, okay, I'll do this.
My mother always taught me nothing is ever weird, it's just different. And then I moved to New York City, and I was like, you're wrong, Mom. There's a lot of weird out here.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I think it's a good thing that we have become so accepted, but it's a different landscape. There used to be a certain, like, look, it's not necessarily the thing that's going to excite you the most, but this is what people do. And now people do different things. And so I think people now end up in a situation where they end up in a sexual relationship where it's like, surprise! It's like, this is a donkey head. I need you to wear this. We have different things. And so that started us off on a theme of things. So we now made 3 of them that have released to the public. Some of them did not get all the way to the end of the line there. So the one I've brought to you guys today is the good, the hot, and the oh so dumb, which is a thing exploring Orlando from As You Like It. Not a super well-known Shakespeare play, but that's fine. We're really exploring not Orlando. We're exploring a different kind of element. Hold on. Everyone just went black, but you all came back. Hooray.
It's all good. This is a podcast, too. It's going to be audio and video. So if the video cuts out for like half a second, it's not the end of the world.
Fantastic.
So how long do you think from start to finish that sketch took to put together? Like, when did you start writing it? Like, when did you think, oh, I want to do something about this Shakespeare play and adapt it, and then to completed project? How long do you think that took?
From like, I'd say from actually sitting down and writing it to the final edit, I'd say 5 weeks, probably.
Cool.
You know, the way it works is when you have a collaborator, you have all these ideas that you're like, oh, that's a nugget of an idea. I'll get to that eventually. And that's, you know, it lived on a note in my phone for a few months, but then eventually we got to it.
I mean, eventually every film production is a collaboration. There's never, I got to sit down with a filmmaker who did the first Kingsman movie, Matthew Vaughn. And I asked him, give me any nugget of filmmaking advice, anything cool. And he said, you know, everything at its core is one person behind the camera, one person in front of the camera. As long as you have those two people, there's a film there. You can do it somehow, one way or another. And it was just kind of like, oh, it was his nice way of saying, just because you're poor doesn't mean you can't make a movie.
Right.
And, you know, I took that with, you know, the idea too, that every film is a collaboration. You got to work with somebody eventually. So I think it's better to have a person right from the get-go to collaborate with, bounce ideas back and forth. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
You should have brought Molly to the podcast too with Tim.
Yeah. I did. Yeah, I probably should have. I'm probably going to catch hell for not bringing her today. But
we'll give Molly her own episode.
Yeah, that's great. Give her own episode. I had the thought of like, should I try? But I was like, you're inviting me. I don't want to like invite someone else along. I would have felt.
It's not like we don't have room in the apartment here in the Zoom chat.
In the Zoom, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, no. So the way it works, Molly's my collaborator on specifically the Shakespeare Dating Fables. That she's like a co-creator of that, and then there are other things on my channel that she doesn't participate in. You know, she has her own career as a stand-up comedy, but that's kind of where we unite. And she was in three-way with me as well, so that all helps.
So on in Plan Z Productions, how many people do you kind of have working in either in rotation or like with you all the time?
I like to keep kind of a wide net of people, because it's no budget filmmaking. You know, no one's getting paid. They're all doing it kind of for the love of it, and so I'm aware that everything I'm asking is just like, please help me, you know. So I don't want to overwork anyone. So I pretty much try to keep a really large group of people like that. I only need to call in every 3 months, ideally. I do have a few people who have really stepped up and are really kind of my stalwart people are always there. Luis Romero is, you know, one of my big DPs for a lot of these projects. And Louis Aronowitz me and him really started collaborating during the quarantine, has become an amazing composer for a lot of our recent sketches. So
very cool. I like Louis. But he's a nice guy.
Yeah.
I've worked with him a couple other times too after we worked actually together on. So we worked together. This is how we worked together 10 years ago on a feature film that I don't think ever came to be.
I keep forgetting that that's true.
Yeah. Over almost 10 years ago. And then we didn't see each other for about 9 years. And then we did this AT&T weekend-long film competition where you meet on Friday, you film on Saturday, and then everyone shows their film on Sunday. And it was a giant mess, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And the whole time when I met you on Friday, I think that's why I was initially wanted to like group up with you, because I was like, I feel like I know this guy. There's familiarity. Like I might know him. And then we didn't figure it out until almost the end of the shooting day on Saturday, because you brought in another actress that you had met on the feature film that we'd worked on way back when to be in the skit.
And side note, she was living in LA at the time. She was like in for the weekend, and I randomly I hadn't seen her in like 9 years either, and I was like, hey, do you want to come collaborate on this thing? And she jumped in, and she's the one who I think really made the connection. They're like, we were in that terrible movie together. Oh my God.
She looked at me and she was like, you look really familiar. And I was like, you look really familiar. And I couldn't place it for a while. I think once she started saying like, I'm originally from New York, I worked on a couple films, what have you worked on? And it just boiled down to, it was this Red Riding Hood feature-length movie that was supposed to be really bloody. Tim, you played a werewolf. Is that right?
I played 4 different things. They kept rewriting the script.
They rewrote the script so many times and kept reshooting it every time they rewrote the script. I don't think this film ever got finished, and it was just a giant mess the whole way through. But it was a fun mess that after 8-9 years, we got back together. We worked on this fun project, which was also a mess. Seems like when we work together, it's a mess. This podcast might be a mess at the end of this.
Okay. That's my hallmark, really. Like when you work with me, it's a disaster.
Hey, anything that hits the YouTube page is a good disaster. It's fun. Your sketches are hilarious. They're really fun. Do you write them? Do you write them? Does Molly write them?
It depends on the sketch. So the sketch that I've shared that we're going to show today is I wrote with some collaboration with Molly. But for instance, if you look at the Shakespeare Dating Fables, I wrote the first one with some editing from her. She wrote the second. I wrote the third. And pretty much anything that's not one of those I wrote. That's not a rule right now. I'm open to other writers contributing stuff, but right now it's one less person I have to beg. So,
are you doing a lot more writing during the quarantine?
I'm doing some writing. I've been doing a lot of like collaboration and editing. Honestly, this whole I'm very chasing the dollars most of the time. Like I'm always working some shit job that I don't. Can we curse on here? I already have. Are we good? What's your PG rating?
Oh yeah, you can say whatever the fuck you want, man.
Fantastic. So I'm usually like working some shit job to like pay the bills and all that stuff, and I never have time to like finish my own projects. So like now that I can't do any of that, it's kind of been freeing to just like sit down and edit all these projects that have just been sitting like in a hard drive for so long. So there's been writing, there's been editing, there's been a lot of posts. Super excited because I got these new sketches. I didn't bring this one today, but it's like these are collaborations. It's kind of how Jim and I met up this time, but like asking people to submit these really small things and then kind of weaving them on this theme that I put out there. So it's kind of like a new thing. See how that works out.
Very cool. You should join up with the Astoria Filmmakers Club. That's what this podcast is, the AFC Podcast. There's tons of people in it and involved in it that I'm sure would love to work on these sketches and get some experience. There's a lot of entry-level people, and there's also a lot of people that have been doing this for like 30 years. So it's a weird range of a lot of cool different people in the Astoria area.
I love it. I love entry-level people. I love people who are passionate about it. And I just love, I don't know, working with people who aren't dicks. It's kind of nice.
That's pretty much my rule for most people. Like we can be friends as long as you're not a dick.
This business is too hard to do with like people who are dicks. It's just too much.
Yeah, I've worked with a couple people too that have just been doing it so long and they're so jaded by all the things that might be wrong with the industry, and they just walk in on day one and they're just like ready to go home. They're over it. They know what they're getting themselves into. There's no fun in it anymore for them. I mean, what a job to be a filmmaker. What a job.
It's a really
it's crazy.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because like I worked behind the scenes as a crew member on my wife's short film. My wife recently shot a short film, bigger budget than my things normally are, but so I was working with some of these crew members who were used to working on commercials, and it was just a very come at this from an actor. I have a theater background that I really and Ackland was in for a Twinkie. But I'm there and I'm talking to these guys and they're so like, and I know they're getting paid way more than any of the actors on the set are, and they're just so annoyed about everything. And I was like, and it was this odd thing, and like, oh no, man, this isn't as good as when I'm on this commercial or whatever. And it was very strange because like I don't want to judge it. Like everyone makes their money, do the thing, but it was like these guys seemed. I was like, is this why you went to film school? Is this what you wanted to do, work in commercials? That seems strange to me. So it was like this odd, very, very downbeat, very cynical, very kind of upset about everything element of it that I was, but then talking about like wanting to do a feature, wanting to do these things, and I was like, oh, okay.
It's really interesting. my fiance's production company was just starting to do a web series, and they had a potential producer that was interested and wanted to see some of the what they were going to put out before they invested their money. Thanks to coronavirus, that producer is nowhere to be found. But in trying to get, crew to make it as professional as possible, so he can say, this is what we did with, out of our own pocket. Imagine how much better it would be if you invested your money, and, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. When he went on, film websites and looking for crew members and whatnot, he put it out there like, we're paying out of our own pocket. We could pay you a little bit, but, hopefully this leads to a producer. The actors were like willing to do it for free all the time. The crew members were like ripping him to shreds. Like, this is illegal. You can't do this. And he's like, I didn't mean to insult you guys. I just, it's amazing the disparity between what an actor is willing to do and what the crew side is willing to do, depending on if it's a passion project or not for them.
I will say this, my experience is mostly that on different groups, if you go on like Facebook groups and stuff, which is a place that I get hired quite a bit from, if you see the posts, a lot of times they'll say, this is for no pay, or this is for whatever pay it's for, this is how much we have, that's all we got. Most people are like, okay, it's unfair that you're paying somebody nothing or close to nothing, but at least you're just telling us that. So, I mean, usually people are pretty cool with how you come forward and say, I have no money, but I really want to do this. Can someone please help me out? Because people might, but you might get no hits, but also, what are you going to do? Usually when people overreact or go, like, this is illegal, this is crazy, it's because someone said, oh, I'd love to hire you guys. It's a paid position. And then they email and they're like, yeah, I have $40 and hopes and dreams. Can I pay you in hopes and dreams?
Well, that's not what Nick's production company did. They put it right out there in the post. Like, this is how much we could pay you.
Yeah, some people are just being jerks then.
But it was a lot of that jaded attitude of like, oh, you're just another one that says, down the road there's, money, but blah, blah, blah. And he's like, no, but
hopefully this jaded attitude, people are getting some perspective during coronavirus and realizing that they could be working a 9-to-5 in some stuffy office somewhere instead of working on a film set and doing something fun, even on a boring commercial where you just have to get the job done and film whatever product you're promoting or whatever kind of commercial it is. It's still working on a film set, and it's still better than selling paper at Dunder Mifflin. That sounds really cool. That sounds so
that sounds pretty cool. Yeah. That's kind of, and I don't want to make it, don't get me wrong, like, go for what you want, get paid what you deserve, make your stand, find your thing. But I used to do a lot of the Facebook group posts, but I started too many fights. And like, I'd put out a thing and I'd say, hey, and I'd say like big up top, no pay, this is the situation. I do the whole thing. I kind of try to do a little mission statement, show the sample of the work and all this stuff. And then I get these like angry notes, which I wouldn't comment on, because like, I get it. I get how many times, like, I don't love when they do it for actors. So it's like, sure, I just move along, but okay, fine. But then the moderators jump into this explicitly in the rules of the thing. Like, they'll defend me and then they'll start fighting. And I'm like, I don't like any of this.
It's tough too, because if there's a person who's interested in your project and they're like okay with doing it for no money, now they look at that post and all they see is everyone going at each other's throats and they don't want anything to do with it.
As an actor, the only time I've ever like really given someone attitude about it was I saw someone put up a no pay casting notice on Backstage for an escape room. They were like, wanted you to come in and record a thing that would play when you escaped an escape room. Like, it was a one-day thing. But it was like, no pay, but hey, you'll have exposure and you get half price tickets to go to the thing. And I'm like, you're a business, man. We do that to like create art. Like, you are a business. You're not even give them like free passes. You're gonna give them like a few half price ones. That seems. And I sent them an email and then they threatened to sue me for sending them an email. It escalated very quickly. That's kind of like, I don't know. It's like, I don't think the soda guy is like going to work on exposure, but just a different thing. It's hard. I started this with, that like South by Southwest, the Mark Duplass keynote speech you guys have probably heard of. Like it was this whole thing about the cavalry's not coming, make movies with your friends. And then I realized I don't know any friends who know anything about technical stuff. So I went to try to find some. And I started wars on Facebook groups.
I mean, if you always wait until you have the funds totally to do something, you're never going to do it.
No.
So you have to, keep pushing, keep trying to get the funds so that you can pay people where you can. But, otherwise things don't get made and they just sit on your phone as an idea and they never get finished. Tim, I wanted to ask you, you are married to Malka Wallach, who is an actor that I've had the pleasure of working with, and she's starting to get into her own creative projects as far as short films and stuff like that. Do you guys collaborate a lot as a couple?
Not in an official stance. We haven't collaborated yet. She's the star of my next comedy sketch, because it's basically just me watching her deal with the coronavirus. It's out this week. So we do in that way. In terms of other things, like we show each other things, we bounce writings off of each other, we bounce edits off of each other. I was the caterer on her last project, but we've never written anything together. We never produced anything. Well, no, we never produced film together. We used to have a theater company together, and she was the artistic director, and I was kind of the underling. But we're very different artists. Plan-Z Productions is about this kind of like indie punk rock comedy thing. It's very like DIY aesthetic, and her company Girl Gang Productions is about empowering young female voices. It's about giving, really trying to deliver that experience, which clearly is exactly what I'm well designed to do. So I don't know why she hasn't asked me to collaborate yet. It's a mystery. Yeah, I mean, I think my comedy is feminist in general, like, and if it wasn't, she would fucking tell me. So I'd like to go for that, but I don't comedy. Well, she's becoming more comedic, but comedy has not traditionally been her medium. She tended to be more dramatic. So I think we'd be more likely to collaborate in more like a short film or a feature film, because that tends to be, Three-Way has that kind of like Kevin Smith thing of like, ha ha ha, ooh, like slightly more serious at the end of it. That's maybe a genre we'd be more fitting in. But who knows? She had feelings about what I just said. I'm not sure what.
Well, we're going to need to have Malka on her own episode as well, so we can talk to her.
I am going to, as a white male, I'm going to automatically volunteer her for it. Yeah.
Done. Thank you for using your privilege.
I'll send my wife over.
Spoken.
Well, so, Tim, you said your style's a little like punk rock comedy, so that has to lead me to the film choice that you picked for us.
Yes.
Your choice for us to watch was Hedwig and the Angry Inch. Why did you pick that film? Out of
the
sheer
question
curiosity.
that Jim posed was like, "Hey, what's your favorite movie?" And my favorite movie is Hedwig and the Angry Inch. I've known that since about high school. That was always like my number one spot. There have been some challengers recently, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Jojo Rabbit, The Farewell. There's some really good movies the last 5 years. But it's hard to say, but there's something about that movie that presents this comedy, but also this really, really raw heart to it. There's something I'm not a big fan of kind of postmodern filmmaking and Terrence Malick films in general. I haven't seen all of them, but like Tree of Life, those movies that tend to be more, we're getting into the poetry of the thing. I find that stuff, whereas by being less literal, I think those movies are supposed to tap into kind of a more raw emotionality that's less cerebral for the viewer. For me, that doesn't work. It has the opposite effect. It tends to just brick wall into my but I don't get it. Like I try to make sense of it, and that's not what you're supposed to do. So I'm a bad audience for those films. But there's something very about Hedwig that's very atraditional in its structure and very collage. It is that punk rock aesthetic of like it's stitched together and safety pinned together. That is very powerful and very meaningful to me. This very painful story about love, about finding identity, about trying to find your way in the world when you don't feel like you fit. That just always resonates with me in a very, very big way.
Sure, it was groundbreaking too at the time, especially 2001, 19 years ago was when it came out.
Oh my God.
So, talking about so many transgender issues and things that go on with a transgender person sometimes. And I mean, 20 years ago, I didn't hear a word. I mean, I was in high school, but 20 years ago, I never heard of a movie that was talking about these things.
No.
So I'm sure that it kind of broke the mold a little bit. It definitely too, it rocks. The music is great.
The music is amazing.
I was watching it and I was taking in all these like raw emotional stories that they tell. And as they're saying it, all of a sudden it kicks in and I'm just like kind of headbanging a little bit, getting into it. But there's a reason that it also is a Broadway show. Is it still a Broadway show right now?
Not currently, no.
Well, it was a musical first, and then they adapted it into a film, and it's made some resurgence. Every couple years, it kind of pops back up, either in New York or LA or London, and pop back up.
Yeah, it was originally some downtown theater. Like when it first was a play, it wasn't on Broadway. When Neil Patrick Harris, that's his name, right? When he did it, that was the first time it had ever been on Broadway. And it was different. Like they had rewritten the script, they had rewritten songs. It was a different beast.
Well, Neil Patrick Harris can do just about anything. So.
Yeah. I saw that twice on Broadway when it came out. I saw with the guy Dexter. What's his name?
Michael C. Hall.
Michael C. Hall. So Michael C. Hall, and then I saw the original himself when he took over the role, the original Hedwig, which was great. Ortiz would say it was great. He had apparently broken his leg at some point early on in the run, and so it was in a cast. And so they had written in this whole bit where he has this box that he rests his leg on whenever he has a chance, and he just make Yitzhak move around and move things like, oh, that feels so great. bad box puns throughout the thing. I loved it.
Fantastic. It's the little things,
It is.
Not about the angry inch.
Yeah. It is very strange that is my favorite movie. I'm like a cisgendered white straight male. I'm as privileged as it can be. I am the prince, but there is something about this just maligned misfit who can't fit in anywhere that my heart just kind of like reaches to.
I dig that. It's great.
Yeah.
Well, Tim, thank you so much for joining us, for talking to us about Plan Z and all the stuff that you got going on. We'll definitely be sharing all your links. We'll be showing a little bit of your clips. But thank you so much for your time today.
Awesome. Thank you very much. All right, everyone, we're going to take a look at our clip of the good, the hot, and the oh so dumb. A moment that hopefully many women recognize, the moment where you realize you're dating a guy who's very hot, but not so much upstairs.
You okay? Peachy keen with sugar on the tip. On the tip? I don't even know. Things are weird with boyfriend. Orlando? He seems sweet. Oh, he's sweet, all right.
Hi!
Might be a little too sweet. The boy is just... he dumb. Dumb how?
OMG, babe, did you know the world is actually flat?
No.
I always thought that. I tried balancing on a bouncy ball once, and it did not work.
No.
Oh, Entourage is on.
That's, there's no excuse for that. I know. Is he a pump his ass sometimes? No. He's super chill, actually.
I believe the cooties is a real disease. I understand that people might disagree, but I believe to live and let live. Ooh, gumball.
At least he's the complete opposite of my ex. Devin. Super confrontational about all things hipster.
Mumford & Sons is the cafe Americano of folk rock, just watered down.
He made no sense. But so good in the sack. This motherfucker couldn't eat bacon, but had no problem eating my roommate's.
All right, Celia, focus. Poetry is also an issue.
What's it about?
Me.
Oh.
No.
Oh.
Roses are red. So are leaves that are dead. Would you like to come to bed with me? Nailed it.
They can't all be winners.
When I talk like this in a pattern that you may not expect or recognize, it helps me underline my...
Which is?
I don't know.
And then there was his unspoken poetry phase.
Oh my god, he dumb.
You were real dumb.
So why don't you just dump his ass?
I don't know.
Hey guys. Ooh, shiny.
That's right. There you go. Yeah, I'm gonna go ride that dick till I see God. You do it. You ride that dick like a Thanksgiving float.
You swipe that unlimited card and just keep riding it. Do it. Proud of you. Meanwhile, Devin, you up? How's your dick?
Thank you, Tim, for coming in. That was a great interview. We loved learning more about Plansy Productions, and thank you for sharing that hilarious Shakespeare-inspired sketch. As a Shakespeare nerd myself, I thoroughly enjoyed it, considering I also just did As You Like It, so special place in my heart. Let's talk a little bit about his movie suggestion, Hedwig and the Angry Inch.
Yeah. Hedwig and the Angry Inch is a 2001 American musical comedy drama. It's a little bit of everything. Film, written for the screen and directed by John Cameron Mitchell. This movie, I don't know what I was expecting because I had heard the name before, and I think I vaguely knew that it was a musical or a show. I didn't know about the movie, but when you hear the name Hedwig and the Angry Inch, you don't exactly know what to pull out of that. Like, you don't know, like, what is this about? The first thing I thought of was Harry Potter, because Hedwig is Harry Potter's owl. But I was like, that's not what it is. And 5 minutes into the movie, I immediately was like, this has something to do with a penis. Angry Inch in here somewhere, and I didn't know what it was. And this movie was funny. It was very emotional. There's parts of this movie where you get like wound up. You're like, oh my god, this is like, the acting was great. I thought the performances were really crazy. The music is really great. What do you think?
I was floored by it. I too didn't know what to expect. I knew it was a musical. I didn't see it when it was on Broadway. Financial reasons, could not afford tickets. But I wasn't quite sure what to expect, because I also didn't know the format of the musical. The musical itself is essentially a show. It takes place, I think, don't quote me, because again, I haven't seen it. I was just looking it up, getting ready for watching it. It takes place all in one performance of Hedwig's across the street from Tommy Gnosis' show.
So they just pretend that they're actually doing a live show?
Yeah. So I think that this, normally I'm not a huge fan of musicals being turned into movies, but based off of this, I think this was a great interpretation and actually used film in beautiful ways to expand on this world that they were creating. It was, like it was hyperactive, and yet it was a rock show, and it was, a soap opera, and yet it was so real all at the same time. It was so well done, and it was such a great story of self-identity and trying to, like how Tim said, trying to find where you fit in a world that you don't think has a place for you.
Yeah, I mean, that it's crazy to think of the journey that Hedwig actually went on, starting out life as a young boy, eventually meeting this like military guy who marries him, convinces him to have a sex change operation. They botch the sex change operation. Hedwig just goes through all this stuff, then meets Tommy Genosis, Silent G, and then teaches Tommy how to like make music and produce and sing, and basically helps him develop his whole image. And then he blows up and becomes super famous. I thought that was really interesting because I always think about when celebrities are, when they blow up or they're super famous, like who was Ryan Reynolds' friend growing up, who was I'm trying to think of another actress who's Scarlett Johansson's best bud from growing up. Does she keep in touch with them, or does that best bud super jealous of that person's success?
Well, I mean, you got to think it happens a lot in, acting schools and stuff like that. Whoever was like the big star in acting school might not make it out and be the big star out in real life. It might be someone else from the same school, and you never know. And people are always going to be, jealous or whatever. But I think something that was a constant through the film was how it felt like everything that Hedwig did ended up being like she sacrificed for nothing. Like when Hedwig was Hansel and lived in East Berlin before the wall came down, one of the whole reasons beyond the fact that he was in love with the military man, one of the reasons that he got married and had the sex change was that he could leave East Berlin where he felt like he didn't fit and he didn't have a place. And so he went and had the sex change, which got completely botched. So he's gender queer at this point, or like he doesn't have he doesn't know where he fits as a gender identity. So he decides to live as a female, as Hedwig. And then a year later, not only does his husband leave him for a man in America, but the wall came down. So everything that he sacrificed, leaving his home and his mother and literally changing who he was for nothing.
Yeah. I mean, too, he also left his mother behind. I always thought about that too, where like he basically took on the identity of his mother, because his mother's name is Hedwig. What a name. Imagine being born and your name is like, hi, I'm Hedwig Fragnito. Like, that would have been a rough life.
Well, I feel like I would have made it work.
Yeah, you would have pulled it off. It would have been fine. I don't know. I mean, the whole movie was just a roller coaster. I forget the character's name, but basically Hedwig's later on husband that winds up getting a role in a production of Rent. That whole story was very interesting too, because it was this person's trying to find out their identity and figure themselves out, and Hedwig, who's had to deal with that their whole life, like having to see that happening to somebody else and just reacting so poorly to it, and then eventually coming around and trying to help, and everything was just really well put together for this movie. It's rated really well. It did very well. Budget-wise, it was $6 million to make. It only brought in the box office $3.6 million, which is a massive failure if a movie does not make its money back. But all around, like, the audience really liked it. Audience score is pretty high, and the critic score is in the 90s, so it did really well in terms of that. Yeah, now it has a big cult following.
Yeah. I mean, and to think of the year that it came out in 2001 was when it was released. So it was filming in 2000, and that means the musical was going around before then. I mean, now I can't think about, like, I can't imagine, and also we live in a very liberal area, New York, but I can't imagine, how that show must have been received back then. That was so groundbreaking. for a story like
in
that.
the same way that Hedwig and the Angry Inch Band was received in all these small bars where people would get up and just scream obscenities at them and start food fights and beating the crap out of each other. It's probably a toned down version of that in real life, because I'm sure people were like, let's go see a Broadway show, and then they sit down and they go, oh fuck, what did we do?
One of the it wasn't on Broadway immediately. It
Right.
was in like the smaller theaters in New York, which definitely is the place to, that's the birthplace of shows like that, the smaller theaters and the more indie theaters where they could do more experimental things, and it's not just, let's revive Oklahoma for the 50 millionth time to make money. Or now it's, let's turn movies into musicals to make money. But, I can after seeing it and as I've, expanded my circle of friends and I've met more transgendered people and I've gotten to know their stories and where they're at in their lives, it's amazing to see such a, I can only imagine how impactful that story is to people who have such a hard time trying to find their identity and find their place in society, when society feels like all it wants to do is force you into this specific box.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, being a straight white male, I don't necessarily have a movie that's like, oh man, this is the movie that I feel like really, highlighted the straight white male. Like that's all movies. That's 90% of movies. If anything, I would equate it to like how African American people felt when Black Panther came out, because almost, everybody in that movie was African American. They're all shown in a positive light. None of them are like, drug dealer number 4. Like they're all superheroes and they're all people saving the world constantly. It was, groundbreaking, and it used film to showcase, people that aren't just straight white males, because that's most movies up until. So, I mean, especially it happening 19 years ago, that's for sure groundbreaking.
And the music was so good.
Yeah, I was headbanging the whole, like halfway through the movie. I'm like, in 2001, the film won the Best Director and Audience Awards at the Sundance Film Festival, as well as the Best Directed Debut from the National Board of Review and the Gotham Awards and the Los Angeles Film Critics Association. Mitchell, the director, received a Golden Globe nomination for Best Actor in a Motion Picture, Musical, or Comedy, and the Premiere Magazine Performance of the Year Award. All these accolades, and it, box office flop. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah. Especially when you see what a following it's got now. It's so funny, to see things that, flop initially and then finally find their base later. They find their friends.
Sometimes you just need to see a movie at home. You want to take the DVD, you want to watch it on your couch. Mm-hmm. Video on demand is certainly making those kinds of movies more popular, easier, more accessible to see. And I'm sure there's less tolerant people out there too that don't want to see a movie publicly. Like, oh, what if I get seen seeing this movie? Shut up, dude. Just watch the movie. Mm-hmm. But I enjoyed the crap out of it. It was a great movie.
I had no idea what was in store with the film, which I love being surprised by movies like that.
Yeah, all the cool cartoon sequences too that they did.
I love those.
Stuff. Yeah, it was great.
It stirred up so many emotions, and you can see, how everyone is dealing with the sense of identity and who they are, and even Tommy Gnosis, who's kind of portrayed as the villain a little bit in this. You can see his struggle in trying to figure out, who he is, his sexual identity, who he is as an artist. Hedwig trying to figure out who she is, who they are. I guess at the end, you don't even really know where Hedwig lands on all that. And maybe we don't need to. We don't need to know as long as Hedwig knows. But and Hedwig's husband, which again I can't pronounce the name. I heard it 50 times in the film and I still can't pronounce the name. I had no idea that character was portrayed by a female actor until about halfway through the film when I heard the singing voice more clearly.
Oh, it was?
Yeah, it's awesome.
I think I could have seen that if I had I don't think I called it at one point, but immediately upon seeing that person, I was like, this person's trying to struggle with some identity issues right now.
Yeah.
I think I just noticed, I think it was like the beard looked a little fake.
It didn't look fake to me. I wasn't sure until we got to later on and I could actually hear the voice that it was, the actor was a female. But I didn't know how the character necessarily identified as a male. Which I think after reading up on the film that the character did identify as a male and was actually a drag queen.
Oh, wow.
But yeah. I think it's fantastic film overall. It was surprising. It's heart-wrenching. It's fun. It was just great.
Yes, I agree. Let's get into some current events.
Yeah.
If I can find them, here they are. Adding on to the Universal and AMC feud, we have an update from AMC's pretty much direct competitor Regal Cinemas, came out and said, we also don't want to play Universal movies, which I think is a very big integrity power move here because they could have totally kicked AMC while they were down. AMC was basically saying they're not going to play Universal's movies because Universal is now switching a lot of their stuff to on demand, which is putting movie theaters out of business. So AMC came out and basically said, we don't want to play your movies anymore if you're going to do that. And I found it surprising because Regal could very much swoop in and be like, yeah, we're going to play all the movies whenever people want them. Mm-hmm. And then all of the consumers would have immediately been like, cool, screw AMC. We're going to go to Regal because they have the movies. It's like Arby's. We have the meats, but we have the movies. But instead of doing that and swooping out their competition and just taking in all the money, they said, yeah, no, that's a dick move, Universal. Screw you, man. And stuck to their guns about that. I think that's really an interesting move.
Well, I think that this whole time, we're all thinking, this whole rigmarole that AMC is putting everybody through, saying they're not going to play Universal's films. We all know that as soon as we get back, they're going to play them because they're some of the biggest moneymakers coming up. Jurassic World, Dominion, and the Fast and the Furious movies, all of the big blockbusters that actually do bring people into the theater. They can't afford to say no to those. And, you're just thinking they're just putting up a big stink, which, it's not that they're completely in the wrong about it. Like, they should have been consulted and talked to about it before Universal did it because they did have, a deal to put these movies in their theaters. Granted, coronavirus changed all that, and, it's just kind of pushing the landscape further into video on demand and streaming territory, which is where things are going. And AMC's on the brink of bankruptcy anyway. But, having another theater, even your direct competitor, come out and stand by you in solidarity and say, we're not going to either because this was not fair business practice. It's not good faith business. That changes the game a little bit. So,
they can even though the movie theater ship, because there's nothing that can beat me waking up in my underwear and being able to watch any movie I've ever wanted to watch from the comfortability of my couch. So it's hard it's hard to say that I can do that, but also there's still the movie theater experience. So this is shaking things up a little bit. I think it's getting a little rocky. We're really not going to know how this pans out until either something else crazier happens or movie theaters come back into play. Mm-hmm. But speaking of movie theaters coming back into play, we can get into our next current event, which it's pretty crazy. Asia's box office reopened, or did they?
They didn't reopen, but because they didn't reopen, they have a 97% loss in profits.
Right.
Based off of last year's numbers. And it's kind of incredible because the Asian market, films that may not do so well here in America and maybe quote unquote flops can still make a huge profit because of the overseas markets, and especially in China and Asian markets. I think China is the second largest market, followed closely behind by Japan. But all of these films had to push back their premieres, their Asian premiere dates. They had to, they shut down their theaters because they were obviously hit by the coronavirus first. They had to shut their theaters down in January. They tried to reopen some in March, and then were quickly had to close them again. So their profits for the first quarter of the year are practically nothing. And that's a huge hit to box offices everywhere. That's a huge hit to theater or movie companies everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it before in terms of like these movie studios are investing millions and billions of dollars into the film industry, and Asia is the biggest market for these American movies. It's kind of weird that we're making American movies and Asia is the biggest place where they play and make the most money. But that's just how it is, and the most money that we could potentially make is 97% out of whack.
Yeah.
Making 3%. I think we can get by on 3%. What do you think?
I'm not quite as optimistic as you are, Jim, but we'll see.
Never know. Let's talk a little bit about some casting news, both Disney now related because Disney owns all the things. Taika Waititi has been announced as the new director for at least one Star Wars movie. He was in The Mandalorian as, I believe he played the robot in Mandalorian. He's also the director for a number of really big movies, Oscar-nominated Jojo Rabbit. I believe it won a couple of awards. He directed Thor Ragnarok. He's been in the film industry for a very long time. I'm not sure what else has he done. Do you remember any other movies that he's done?
Not off the top of my head, but I know he's been doing this for a while.
Taika Waititi. What else is he known for? I mean, doing a Star Wars movie seems like a natural step for him because he's great with comedy. He's great with action. He finds a really cool blend for everything in between, Mm-hmm. So, What We Do in the Shadows, Thor Ragnarok, Hunt for the Wilder People. Haven't heard of that, but most notably known for Thor Ragnarok and Jojo Rabbit. But he's been around forever. He's been doing movies. I think he was in one of the biggest box office bombs ever, Green Lantern, starring Ryan Reynolds. He's in that movie. So maybe that's why we can't remember any other movies he's done, because he started out in a pretty rough movie. I think he was acting in it. I don't know if he directed it or what, but he's been around for a long time, and it's cool to see him because I like his movies that I've been seeing recently, and to do a Star Wars movie, especially too, I'm not too happy with the last couple of Star Wars movies.
Yeah.
They're a little rocky, So to have a director that I already know, I like what he puts out, I like his stuff. But that same can be said for Rian Johnson too. Rian Johnson's a good director. I gotta say, I hated his Star Wars movie.
I hated things about his Star Wars film. There were some things like Leia floating in space and the Force, magically pulling her back in and saving, like that was weird. But I think that Taika Waititi's going to have a little bit of an advantage in that any Star Wars movie that they make from here on out is only going to be like a fringe story, if anything, to the Skywalker saga. So I mean, one of my favorite, I think, movie that they've made since the original Star Wars trilogy was Rogue One. I think that was super well done. It was a really great story. And again, it was, even though it did have to do with, the creation of the Death Star and getting the Death Star plans, it was still kind of a fringe story to the main Skywalker trilogy. So I think in that, he has a little bit of an advantage in that this is newer territory. So he can create, like, that's why The Mandalorian is such a big hit. It takes place outside of that main story a little bit. Of course, they're all connected, but it's kind of its own thing.
I mean, it just proves how vast the Star Wars universe can be, and that you can come up with a completely new and different character that has such an incredible story. You need to watch The Mandalorian because it is.
I know. Again, on my list.
Yes.
On my list.
On the same topic of Disney movie casting announcements of sorts, not casting, but the live-action Hercules movie. It seems to be the next live-action adaptation that Disney is doing. The Russo brothers, who are very well known for putting out stuff like Infinity War, Avengers Endgame, Captain America Civil War. They do all the best Marvel movies. These guys are putting them out. They've also worked on Community, and there was another comedy show that they... Development, that's the one. These guys are comedic geniuses, and they're also great with action, and that's what Hercules is. He's funny. It's action-packed type of movie too. They'd be damn fools if they don't call Danny DeVito to come in and play himself as, what is it, Frank? Phil. Frank is, I'm thinking It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Right.
I don't know. Have they released information as to whether or not they're going to make it like a musical? Because I know with Mulan, they're not doing that.
No. They did do a casting announcement a while ago. I don't know how real that casting announcement was.
I've been seeing so many things about people, their wish list casting for, especially if they do go full musical and do the musical numbers, who they want to play Megara and the Muses and all of that stuff.
No idea, but what I've heard is that Hercules is to be played by Chris Pratt. And
I thought that was a wish list. I didn't think that was real.
Well, Hercules, Chris Pratt. Hades is, what's his name? We were just talking about him, Jurassic Park.
Jeff Goldblum?
Jeff Goldblum, yes, because that would be incredible.
That would be incredible.
Anna Kendrick as Meg, which...
Is this real casting, or is this wish list casting?
This was supposedly real casting, but this was also like a year ago, so who knows if it's still what the plan is. But then they also said Danny DeVito would be playing Phil, which I'm all for.
Yes.
The first time I ever got a little teary-eyed watching a Disney movie was when Phil at the end sees the stars, sees the constellation, and his face like drops, like he can't believe it. And he's just like, I get chills every time I see it. Love that movie. I can go the distance. Honestly, I think that cast is okay. I don't know about how I feel about Chris Pratt. Anna Kendrick, I feel like, has the perfect amount of snarkiness, and she can sing, and she's got that attitude to be Meg. I feel like she could do it.
It just honestly all depends on what direction that they decide to go. Are they doing like what they did with in a completely new direction, like they're doing with Mulan, and redoing the story that way? I think once they kind of release all that information, we can try to speculate a little more on who they're casting. But can Chris Pratt sing?
I don't know. I really have no idea. I wouldn't put it past him. Like, if he opened his mouth and started singing, I'd be like, oh, of course Chris Pratt can do that because he's a perfect human being. But if also he opened his mouth and he couldn't sing one note, I wouldn't be surprised either. But he also, of course he can sing because he sings in Parks and Rec all the time. 5,000 Candles in the Wind. he can sing at least moderately good. One of the plot lines in Parks and Rec, which you said you haven't watched all the way through.
I've gotten like through the first 2 seasons, and then life got in the way, and I never got back to it.
Right. One of the plot lines is that he is in a band, and the band keeps meeting. The whole plot line is that he basically is like, well, my band and I, we broke up, and then at one point he runs into the band and they're playing without him at a place. And he's like just super mad that like they would play without him. Like how could they do that? How could they reform the band and not call him? They were like, dude, we had practices all the time. You just never showed up. And he was just like, oh, that's because I lost my watch like a long time ago. Like some dumb excuse, like it was a comedy thing. But then they were like, if you want to sing with us, just come sing with us. And then he got up on stage and would sing. But yeah, he's like leader of a rock band. Mouse Rat is the name of the rock band.
Right, that's coming back to me now.
Great name. But yeah, I think Chris Pratt can sing enough. I don't know how many songs there are in Hercules. I don't think it's overpacked with songs. It's like I Can Go the Distance.
That might be Hercules' only song, and that's when he's like a teenage boy.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, if The Rock can do it in Moana, sky's the limit. Like there's no, like.
Yes, but I will say Maui didn't have to be a fantastically amazing singer, whereas like they've already set the precedent. Like I Can Go the Distance, that is a vocally demanding song, so you need to have some good pipes for that one.
That's true. I mean, if Chris Pratt can take enough voice lessons and make it happen, and also, I mean, the guy's in great shape. He's married now to Arnold Schwarzenegger's daughter, so he better be in good shape. Married to 6-time Mr. Olympian, got that bloodline going. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm cool with that casting. Jeff Goldblum can do literally no wrong. Him as Hades would be hysterical.
That would be great.
There's no substitute to Danny DeVito playing Phil. There just isn't. Now's the time where he's young enough to still run around and do all the things. He's doing live action movies and stuff. He did Dumbo too. He was in the Dumbo movie, which I have not seen, but I think he was like the ringleader for the circus or something like that. But Danny DeVito's at the right age to make Phil look like a real character. Jeff Goldblum is perfect for I can see that movie happening right now. I'm already like picturing it. Ready for it.
Well, we'll have to keep our eyes and ears posted to see if they have any leaks or stories that tell us a little more of the direction they're going, and if there are any casting announcements, we'll keep y'all posted.
I hope they don't take it too seriously. Like I feel like Mulan's taking it very serious and having it which is cool. They're having a down to earth like history written storyline. There's no history. Like Hercules didn't fight a Hydra. Like, come on. Just show me the fun story of that. I want to see it. I want to see Chris Pratt fight a Hydra because that'd be dope. But, don't make it like a super down-to-earth gritty thing. I want to have the humor that Hercules really brought in.
I want to know who's going to play Pain and Panic.
Billy Eichner and Seth Rogen again. Just pair them up. Just from Lion King, Timon and Pumbaa. Same dynamic.
Well, I've not exactly the same dynamic, but I have seen in casting wish lists John Mulaney and Nick Kroll. I would definitely get on board for John Mulaney and Nick Kroll in those roles.
I mean, they're a great pair too. That'd be great. I'm trying to think of 2 others. What's stopping from calling the same voice actors back? Because those are little demons, You could always have the same guys come back in and voice those characters.
Yeah, I think one of them was Bobcat, right?
Who?
Bobcat Goldthwait.
I don't know. Is that a person?
Yes.
I have never heard. Someone's name is Bobcat?
Yes.
That is fucking awesome.
I mean, I don't think that's his real name. I think that's his
It better be.
As a comedian. But yeah.
I'm just imagining like substitute teacher. And is Bobcat here? Bobcat, where are you at, bud? Bobcat's not here. He's too cool for school, dude.
Mm-hmm.
His name's fucking Bobcat. That's awesome. I'm excited. I think that movie's going to turn out pretty good. I think the Star Wars movie, I don't know what direction Star Wars is going to go in, but I feel like they got to get away from the Skywalker saga. They not butchered it, but they just didn't do it justice, I feel.
Well, they kept flipping back and forth between, like, the first one was essentially a love letter to the first one, and then to the first Star Wars with that J.J. Abrams did, and then they did the second movie, which went in completely a different direction, and I didn't disagree with that direction that Rian Johnson took it in, but then because so many people did, they tried to essentially use the third movie to undo everything that the second movie did, and it's like, well, okay, you made the choice, you decided to go in that direction, you wasted a whole movie essentially trying to undo it and still move the plot forward. And it's like, just
that movie wasn't set for success either, because they brought back Mark Hamill, who is the face of Star Wars, pretty much. They bring him in, and at first, very open-endedly, he's on Twitter, and he's like, I'm not feeling this. Like, it's not working. And eventually, Disney stepped in and was like, you need to shut the fuck up, buddy, because Star Wars rests on your shoulders a little bit. Please don't go on Twitter and talk about how you don't like Rian Johnson's script. And then all of a sudden, in all the press interviews, he was like, at first I wasn't a fan, but now after thinking about it, I'm like, yeah, Luke Skywalker would do all those things. And the audience just wasn't buying it. Mm. Most people were like, nah, dude, you're just, they could tell he was kind of being pressured a little bit. But, I mean, the movie does do some good things. It subverts expectations. Like when Luke gets his lightsaber back and you're expecting this big dramatic moment where he unleashes it, and it's super cool and impactful for him. And he's like, oh, I haven't seen this in years. Instead, he just goes, fuck this, and he throws it behind him. But it was a cool way to just bring these characters back.
Yeah.
But I just feel like the execution was lost most of the way through. But it's one of the longest running franchises that are out there. I mean, Star Trek might be older, right?
With their TV show that started.
Yeah, Doctor Who is older. I think Doctor Who's from like 40s or 50s even. Mm-hmm. Star Wars has been around since, 73 was the first one?
Was it that early?
It was in the 70s for sure.
I mean, I knew it was the 70s, but I didn't know it was 73. That's early. Wow.
Let's find out. Just called Star Wars.
A New Hope?
Nope, just Star Wars at the time.
77.
Yeah, May 25th, 1977. We're talking a lot about Star Wars because as we're filming this, it's May 4th.
That's true.
May the 4th be with you.
Well, on that note, everyone, thank you for tuning in. Thank you to Tim for joining us today. We're going to link all of his information so that you can check out everything that's going on at Plan Z Productions. And for everyone here at AFC Podcast, I'm Victoria Fragnito.
I'm Jim Galizia. Thank you guys for tuning in. See you next time.